The Eternal Sovereign had been dead for 874 years. Emperor Zexthal of the Galaxian Imperium stood before the massive dreadnought's hull, his four arms crossed in frustration. The ship stretched for nearly 2 kilometers, its obsidian surface etched with the sacred geometries of his ancestors. Once it had been the pride of the Imperial fleet, a vessel capable of traveling between star systems in mere hours, powered by technology that the current generation could barely comprehend. Your Magnificence, his chief engineer, a tall Veltarian with crystalline skin, approached hesitantly. We have exhausted every possibility. The ancient fusion cores are beyond our understanding. Perhaps it is time to accept that some knowledge has been lost forever. Emperor Zexthal's eyes flashed with anger. Unacceptable. This ship contains the tomb of my great-great ancestor, Emperor Malthek the Conqueror. It must fly again before the Ascension ceremony, or my claim to the throne will be questioned by the outer colonies. The ceremony was only 37 days away. Without the Eternal Sovereign leading the Imperial parade across the home system, Zexthal's legitimacy would crumble. Political rivals were already whispering that he was unworthy of the ancient bloodline. That's when Alvina, his human advisor, stepped forward from the shadows of the hangar bay. The young woman had served the Imperial court for 3 years, ever since the recent peace treaty between humanity and the Imperium. Her species was still considered primitive by most galactic standards, but Zexthal had found their perspectives refreshingly practical. Your Magnificence, she said with a respectful bow. What if we brought in a human mechanic? The Veltarian engineer scoffed. A human? These creatures barely understand their own primitive combustion engines. How could they possibly? Silence. Emperor Zexthal raised one of his hands. He studied Alvina's calm expression. Explain your reasoning. Humans have a unique approach to problem-solving, Your Magnificence. We're very good at improvising with limited resources. While we may not understand the theory behind your ancient technology, we excel at making broken things work again. The Emperor considered this. What did he have to lose? His best engineers had failed. Very well. But I want your finest mechanic, someone who has never failed to repair what was thought irreparable. Alvina smiled. I know exactly who to call. 3 days later, Rafi Martinez stepped off a human transport shuttle, carrying nothing but a worn toolkit and a confident grin. He was a short, stocky man with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails and a reputation for fixing anything with moving parts. Back on Earth, he'd earned legendary status in the auto industry for resurrecting vehicles that other mechanics had declared hopeless. The Imperial engineers watched with barely concealed disdain as the human approached the Eternal Sovereign. Rafi whistled low as he craned his neck to take in the massive ship. Yeah, she's a beauty, all right, he said to Alvina. Reminds me of this old 1967 Mustang I worked on once. Been sitting in a barn for decades. Owner thought she'd never run. Again. And did she? Alvina asked. Rafi's grin widened. Purr like a kitten after I was done with her. Emperor Zexthal had been observing from his elevated platform. Human, he called down, his voice echoing through the hangar. My engineers tell me the ship's fusion core is impossible to restart. The quantum harmonics are completely destabilized, and the power coupling matrix has degraded beyond repair. Rafi looked up at the Emperor, completely unimpressed by the royal presence. Your Majesty, with all due respect, I don't know what any of that means, but I do know that every machine, no matter how fancy, follows the same basic principles. Energy goes in, power comes out, and when it doesn't work, something's blocking the flow. The Veltarian engineer stepped forward. This is ridiculous. This primitive cannot possibly. Let him work, the Emperor commanded. 34 days remain. For the next 2 weeks, Rafi lived inside the Eternal Sovereign. He crawled through access tunnels that hadn't been opened in centuries, armed, with nothing but basic tools and an LED headlamp. The Imperial engineers followed him initially but quickly grew frustrated with his methods. Instead of running complex diagnostics, Rafi would place his ear against pipes and listen. He'd tap on panels with a wrench and interpret the sounds. When he encountered the massive fusion core, a sphere of unknown metal covered in hieroglyphic warnings, he didn't consult the technical manuals. He simply traced the energy pathways with his fingers. "These connections here," he told Alvina on day 12, pointing to a cluster of corroded junctions. "They're like spark plugs in an old engine. Doesn't matter how powerful your fuel is if you can't get the spark to jump the gap." Using techniques passed down from generations of Earth mechanics, improvised solutions involving wire brushes, contact cleaner, and what he called percussive maintenance, Rafi began clearing 8 centuries of accumulated debris and corrosion. The Imperial engineers thought he was insane when he started bypassing safety systems and rerouting power through backup channels. But slowly, impossibly dormant systems began showing signs of life. On day 30, with just 1 week before the ascension ceremony, Rafi emerged from the ship covered in alien grease but wearing his biggest smile yet. "She's ready to start," he announced. Emperor Zexthul descended from his platform, hardly daring to believe. "You're certain?" "Pretty sure, but there's only one way to find out." The Emperor nodded to his bridge crew who took their positions aboard the ship. Alvina stood beside Rafi as they watched from the hangar observation deck. "Beginning ignition sequence," came the voice over the comm system. For 874 years, the Eternal Sovereign had been silent. Now deep within its core, ancient fusion chambers began to hum with life. The ship's hull vibrated gently, and running lights flickered on across its massive frame. With a sound like thunder, the engines roared to life. Emperor Zexthul's voice echoed through the comm, filled with wonder and triumph. "By the Ancestor, it flies." As the Eternal Sovereign lifted gracefully from the hangar floor, the Imperial engineers stared in stunned silence. The human had accomplished what their most advanced science had deemed impossible. Rafi just nodded, satisfied with another job well done. "Like I always say," he told Alvina, "ain't no such thing as unfixable, just haven't found the right approach yet." The Emperor's fleet would indeed parade across the system for the ascension ceremony, led by the greatest ship in Imperial history, restored not by quantum science or ancient wisdom, but by human ingenuity, determination, and the simple belief that broken things were meant to be fixed.